I don't have a Wacom.
Wacom.
I don't have a Wacom drawing tablet, but I want to feel like a whiteboard presenter, a futuristic one. I've wanted to use my drawing tablet to draw on the computer screen. There was two things I needed: a program to send the stylus input from my tablet to my PC, and a program to use that input to draw on the screen. For the first task I tried these programs. They all had one thing in common. When the stylus isn't touching the screen, it doesn't move the mouse. Without such a feature, I don't know where I'm drawing until I start drawing. This is the important line. This one. No. Here is the important line. I'm sure you know which one I'm referring to. This should be possible. Wacom drawing tablets do that, which is kind of what I was going for. I also want to draw some stick figure animations. And it works if I press on the nib on my stylus in the air. So who's to blame? A. Does my specific stylus need the nib pressed in before it sends messages? B. Does my tablet skip those messages when their pressure value is 0? C. Does Android not give a way for us to receive those messages? Or D. Did the developers of all these apps neglect to include such an important feature? So I asked my good old pal, the death of humankind, how to make an Android app. I needed to know it wasn't the app's at fault, so I was going to only make a very quick app to see if it was possible to detect the stylus hovering. I already had Android Studio installed from a few months ago. I tried it and failed to test out emulators a few months ago. I wanted to test out an old version of Momentum without polluting my phone even more, but my physics engine's
shared library file was compiled for
Army API, when I think all of the emulators are x64, so it didn't work. First, second impressions of Android Studio. The default dark mode is extremely gray. I don't like the folder structure. There's so many levels. It just keeps going. And first impressions of Java. It's pretty similar to C#, except every single class needs its own import. I had to phone up the death of humankind for all of them. For some reason, Java is big endian. Java seems to have some nice features as well, like an inner class can access the outer class's variables. The death of humankind insisted that on-hover listener was what I was looking for. It doesn't work. It doesn't work for me. I'm starting to think B is probably the correct answer, but I'm still confused.
Like, subscribe, and join my Discord to become a certified god among men.
That should have been where I stopped, right? And went back to one of the programs that already exists, right? Okay, so I had an idea. What if I taped the nib in and then had it ignore weak pressures? Okay, so I had an idea. What if I live with the limitations and make a pressure threshold before it starts clicking or drawing? So the stylus always needs to touch the tablet for me to see what I'm pointing at, but it only draws when I press even harder. I needed a desktop application to receive my tablet's messages and then move the mouse accordingly. I asked my good old pal if I should use C++ or C#. I was honestly hoping for a warning against C++ because I wanted to believe C# still has a use for me.
Overall, I like C++ more than C#.
I chose C#. WPF specifically. Big mistake. WPF is very slow at rendering. It was supposed to be hardware accelerated, but how am I supposed to believe that? Then I jumped ship to C++, Windows desktop application, and using DirectX 11 to draw the lines. The death of humankind was gracious to give me most of the code, but he was not in a hurry to tell me to set up stencil and such. I had to pull that from my noggin. I made a thought of my own. After that, it actually rendered. But it wasn't as smooth as Virtual Tablet. At the start, I really wanted to use a USB cable to send the messages. I've used a lot of programs that communicate between Android and Windows using Wi-Fi, and it's never been particularly smooth. Come on, sending a little audio over Wi-Fi shouldn't be so choppy. But it seemed the only real option for USB was to write messages to a file, and use Android Debug Bridge to copy the file to the computer and then read it.
Which would definitely create a lot of latency.
The death of humankind was adamant on using Wi-Fi instead. Okay, boss. Wi-Fi was very easy to set up, but drawing on the screen wasn't as smooth as I wanted. Maybe Virtual Tablet uses UDP or something like magic, or I was doing something completely wrong. I really thought USB should have been possible, but just as I was about to give up on it, this guy came in with some interesting information. Port forwarding? I could connect with the internet protocol without Wi-Fi or Ethernet using my USB cable. It didn't work. Eventually I stumbled across port reversing, which is the opposite of port forwarding. Port forwarding would have been the correct one if my tablet was the server, but my PC was the server. I would have known about this possibility if I had scrolled a little more on this GitHub page. Port reversing worked splendidly. It was much smoother than Wi-Fi. I finally have a janky Wacom tablet, and it can draw on my screen. I found a weird bug in Windows. If the program is launched with a shortcut, it can't change icons. So I made a batch file to open the program, and that I can make a shortcut to. I then spent some more time adding features and fixing bugs, and fixing the commit history. I've made the repo public if you want to try it out. The desktop side doesn't have a GUI though, so you'll need to recompile it if you change the settings. That should be easy enough.
If you have Visual Studio,
The controls are easy to remember. Click on the icon to enable or disable. Sometimes you need to double click. Control if you need less control over the cursor. Shift to shift between absolute and relative movement. Q for clear, W for erase, E for change color, R for red and green, and T for stop.
quit.